Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we are cracking open an incredibly fascinating ancient text. We're looking at the 8th chapter of the book of Joshua. Now, whether you read this strictly as ancient history or as a profound religious text, what we find here is an absolutely brilliant and, honestly pretty brutal, ancient military tactical manual. To really grasp the genius of this account, we've got to ask ourselves a huge strategic question. How do you conquer a heavily fortified city using a fake retreat? Because the fall of the city of Ai isn't just some story about brute force. No way. It is a literal masterclass in calculated traps and psychological manipulation. Let's look at exactly how they set the board. So, the crucial point here is Joshua's brilliant three-step battle plan, all mapped out before a single sword is even swung. Step 1, you quietly hide forces behind the city. Step 2, the main force approaches and deliberately fakes a defeat to draw the enemy out. And Step 3, that hidden ambush force strikes the newly undefended city. It's a classic, totally devastating pincer movement. And the sheer scale of this initial setup is just staggering. 30,000. Joshua didn't just send a tiny scouting party out there. He selected 30,000 mighty men of valor, sending them away under the cover of night to lie in wait between Bethel and Ai, right on the city's west side. I mean, just imagine the incredible discipline required to move an army that massive in absolute total silence. Now, here's where the psychological hook comes in. Joshua literally weaponized the king of Ai's own overconfidence against him. The text actually notes Joshua's exact rationale. He says, "For they will say, they flee before us, as at the first." By making the Israelites look like they were completely terrified and running for their lives out into the wilderness, Joshua practically guaranteed the king would empty his own city to chase them. The pacing of the day is rapid and completely chaotic. At daybreak, the king of Ai attacks. By mid-morning, Israel is executing their feigned retreat, drawing the enemy further and further away from safety. Then comes the pivotal signal, and by noon, the city is up in flames. The men of Ai suddenly realize they've left their home completely undefended, and bam, the trap springs shut. And this brilliantly illustrates how the entire battle really hinges on one definitive tactical cue: the spear signal. Standing off in the distance, Joshua stretches out his spear toward Ai. That's the signal. The hidden ambush force immediately rushes the city walls. When the pursuing army of Ai looks back, they see the smoke of their city ascending to heaven, and suddenly they are completely trapped between those flames and Joshua's returning troops. Now, the reality of this ancient total warfare is incredibly grim. 12,000 men and women of Ai fell that day. It's a staggering number. And the text makes a very pointed note to tell us that Joshua completely refused to draw back the hand holding his spear until the destruction of the inhabitants was absolute and complete. It is a sobering, heavy picture of ancient conflict. The aftermath is swift and incredibly decisive. The city is reduced to a permanent heap of ruins. Now, interestingly, unlike the famous Battle of Jericho just prior to this in the text, the divine command here actually allowed the Israelites to keep the cattle and the spoils as prey. As for the king of Ai, he was hanged on a tree until evening and then buried under a massive heap of stones at his very own ruined city gate. Let's move to and see how this builds, because immediately following this intense bloodshed, the text drastically shifts to a scene of profound, solemn order. The Israelites travel to Mount Ebal. They build an altar of uncut stones. Half the people stand before Mount Gerizim for blessings, and half before Mount Ebal for cursings, with the Ark of the Covenant resting perfectly right there in the center. It's just a complete and sudden pivot. Joshua stands up and reads every single word of the law of Moses to the entire congregation, men, women, children, and strangers alike. It leaves us with a fascinating duality to really reflect on, a devastating, merciless military conquest, immediately followed by the absolute, meticulous adherence to spiritual law. So, what do you think? How did these two extreme forces, total brutality in war and strict devotion to a divine law, shape the very foundation of this ancient civilization? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll catch you next time.